a central character in the story that they can identify with. Most of the time, that's going to be you. So you need to make yourself sympathetic. If your listeners can identify with you, then you're good. And that's not always the case with people's stories. I'm going to recount a travel story, which is an example of how not to go. Let's see how sympathetic this story is. So, JC has just gotten back from a 6-week trip to Asia. His backpack still smelling of open-air markets and exotic spices, his dreadlocks long and full. Listen in on the story he's telling his co-workers in the break room. I found most of Nepal really boring, really. I mean, I know all that Buddhist stuff already, and there's really not that much of it there anyway. And not in the cities, at least. You really have to get out in the countryside to see the place. So that's what I did, because that's the kind of person I am. I found this guide who was from this little village on the side of a mountain, and I talked him into taking me there. There were some other people who wanted to come too, but he said no. I was the only one he wanted to travel with. Doesn't surprise me, I get that a lot. So, we're on the way to his village, and I hear this cracking sound. I knew right away what it was. Avalanche. Of course. So I scramble up an outcropping of rock and pull my Nepalese friend out of the way just as the snow comes tumbling down. I mean, this guy's from there, and I had to save him. Can you believe it? Okay, do we identify with JC there? No, not at all. And you'd be surprised how many people tell travel stories like this. I mean, I've been around. I've heard some travel stories, and it's quite remarkable. So how different would it be if we made JC a sympathetic character? If instead of that story, he said something like, I had a really interesting time in Nepal. The culture, the people, but I really wanted to go deeper, you know? I had no idea how I was going to do that. I mean, the language barrier alone. But I fell in with a group of other travelers who were talking to this Nepalese guy. I guess he was from a little village up the side of the mountain, and he agreed to take us there. I was excited. It was exactly what I wanted, but I really wasn't sure. What would the living conditions be like? Would there even be running water? The others must have been thinking the same thing because they all backed out. And this guy looked genuinely hurt. I guess he was really proud of his village and wanted to show it off. I still wasn't sure. I really had to swallow a lot of fear. But I forced myself to do it. I knew I'd regret it if I didn't. How many times am I going to be in Nepal, let alone have a chance to see how some locals live way up in the mountains? So we started up. And it was hard. About halfway up, I heard this strange sound. It was kind of like a low-pitched cracking noise. I have no idea why I did this, but I climbed up on this outcropping of rock. Minutes later, a ton of snow came pounding down exactly where we'd been walking, carrying away everything in its path. It was like being blasted by a snowblower. I still to this day don't know what made me climb out of the way. It must have been intuition or something, because, I mean, I certainly have no idea what an avalanche sounds like. Can you identify with JC in that one?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, what I want you to think about going into our final activity is how do you make yourself sympathetic as the good guy in your own story? So that's our first step. Get a good guy. Second step, what does she want? There's no story without motivation. Your good guy needs to want something. And if you have a sympathetic good guy, the audience will actually want what she wants. They'll root for her when she does well. They'll take it as a physical blow when some obstacle sets her back. If you're a sympathetic good guy with a good motivation, the audience will kind of be in those shoes. Step 3, put her behind the 8 ball. There's no story without some kind of conflict. What obstacles does this good guy need to overcome to get what she wants. If you can overcome obstacles to get to your motivation, and you're already a sympathetic good guy, you're like 75% through the story. And the last part is, how does she change? And this is often overlooked. That this is what makes a story a story. This is what really your listeners are in it for. They want to see how the good guy changes so that they can kind of judge their own reactions to those events and see how they would change. Your good guy has to change as a result of the obstacles she overcomes to get what she wants. So those are the 4 steps. Good guy, want, 8-ball, change. So GWEC, you can call it the GWEC. No, don't call it the GWEC method. Just call it the 4 steps. You'll be fine. And you can see this. I didn't invent these. These have been around for thousands of years. I didn't invent them. They're just the elements of a good story. So, to touch base on that, let's look at how these steps apply to something like The Wizard of Oz. Right? Good guy. Dorothy is a nice country girl who just wants to go out and see the world. She loves her family, but she also wants to experience more than the farm where she was born and raised. What does she want? Dorothy thinks she just wants to get away from being tormented by Miss Gulch just because she has a dog who follows her around. But what she actually wants is what she already has: family. Put her behind the 8-ball. Finding herself in a strange land, Dorothy needs to get home. To do this, she needs to make friends with some of the denizens of this weird place and also avoid the Wicked Witch, who's out to exact revenge. How does she change? Because of what she goes through, Dorothy realizes what she actually wanted was to be with her family all along. That's a really good story. Let's look at comic book Spider-Man. Get a good guy. Peter Parker, the future Spider-Man, is just a nerdy kid who keeps getting picked on. He's smart, but a bit socially awkward, then he gets superpowers. What does he want? Peter wants to show up all the bullies who pushed him around. Using his new superpowers, he becomes a wrestler, winning a bit of cash and some of the respect that he's after. Put him behind the 8-ball. Peter chooses not to stop a thug running out of the wrestling arena with a stolen bag of cash. It's not his problem. When he gets home, he realizes his uncle, the man who raised him, has been killed by the same thug. How does he change? Peter, now Spider-Man, realizes that with great power comes great responsibility. He vows to use his powers for good. That's a really good story. All following the 4 steps. So, that's all great in theory. So how can you use that in practice? How can you get your idea across? Use these 4 steps. You can even use this, I like using this at work, to cut through all the bull dung. And so if you're ever at work and you know those times, there are always those meetings where people are quibbling about the little details and with this. Just take a minute, maybe even make some notes, take the 4 steps. Tell a story about what would happen if they went along with the way that you disagree with. If you follow those 4 steps, you'll see results after telling that story. And no one will even really know why they want to agree with you. They'll just want to agree with you. All right.